Welcome to Monograph Matters. I'm talking today with Jamie Carroll, David Yeager, and Robert Crosnoe, authors of the SRCD Monograph on Mindset by Context, Schools, Classrooms, and Unequal Translation of Expectations into Math Achievement. This discussion focuses on how can one conduct a nationally representative study. How can one conduct a nationally representative study? What are the challenges and pitfalls associated with conducting a nationally representative study? Is it possible to achieve a nationally representative sample study in the contemporary era of education policy?
Yeah, so I think that it was important to conduct a representative sample study for this monograph for three reasons. The first, obviously, is you want to generalize whatever claims we're making about young people to the population of US students. But a second underappreciated reason why you want a nationally representative sample is to have statistical power for subgroup analyses. And anytime you're thinking about inequalities between groups, then you want to be able to make justifiable, defensible claims about how different groups might be affected by different educational stratification experiences. In our case, we were interested in the intersection of gender and SES. And if we just had a community-based sample, then we might not be able to know whether you could generalize any results about inequalities between those groups. The third reason is a little more complex and even less appreciated, which is you don't just want to generalize to groups in general, for instance, boys and girls in school, but also groups in different contexts. And we know that through the historical way that schools have been structured in the US, there's stratification based on socioeconomic status, for instance, in where students go to school. It's heavily intersecting also with race and ethnicity. And so if you want to understand the experience of low socioeconomic status families in school, then you need those families in different kinds of schools, which again meant that we needed a representative sample of schools. Now, that need from an empirical perspective created an enormous challenge from a logistical perspective. So there are no standing panels of US representative groups of schools. Instead, we have a localized education system, which means you need to go to each school district, to each principal, and recruit them into the sample. To do this, we formed a partnership with a research firm called ICF International, developed a rigorous sampling plan. But our study was even more challenging than a typical survey study, where you might want to estimate, for instance, the percent of kids who have this or that risk behavior. And so our firm, which specialized in survey studies, also needed to help us develop a way of getting all of the administrative data, the grades, the courses, the test scores, et cetera. And that meant that lots of schools would say no. And so we ended up having to fly to schools, for instance, recruit principals, visit them in the parking lot at 7:45 in the morning with coffee and donuts, and ask them to participate in the study and to be able to sign agreements for data sharing. And that produced very large, kind of messy sets of data that we then had to process. And I want to let Jamie talk about the process of taking that messy administrative data and giving us a truly legitimately representative sample where student survey responses were linked to their administrative outcomes.
Yeah, thanks, David. One of the wonderful things about the National Study of Learning Mindsets is we have a full census of the ninth graders in each of these schools. And with their administrative records, we're able to really understand the students' course-taking patterns and how they progress through the curriculum in school, which is a big part of this monograph, but also very important to understanding educational inequality in a broader sense. Now, what Algebra 1 means, what Algebra 2 means, what trigonometry means, how it's labeled, and how it's categorized in each different school varies. So part of this process was hiring an outside firm to go through the course catalogs of schools and try to understand what school is equivalent, what course is equivalent to Algebra 1 within this school? What course is equivalent to Algebra 2 geometry in this school? And that's challenging, especially with a lot of schools moving to the Common Core, where sometimes courses are just called Math 1 and Math 2. And we have to get a sense of what those courses mean in order to unify these course-taking strategies or course-taking patterns across all of the schools in our sample. And there was a lot of back and forth in trying to make sure that we got the right course-taking patterns, because a big part of this monograph is understanding, are students making adequate progress from 9th grade to 10th grade in their course-taking level? And that has a lot to do with the context of school that they're in and whether students on average in that school move from Algebra 1 to geometry, or maybe they move to Algebra 1 to Algebra 2. And so that was a big part of this monograph, was making sure that we captured the course-taking patterns for students, as well as the normative pathways within each school context.
And I'll just add, as a psychologist, I previously didn't appreciate the sociological expertise that it requires to process not just grades and test scores, but course-taking data. And it takes creativity. So for instance, many schools would tell us that kids are in a course called Geo. Well, is that geology or geography or geometry? And if it's geometry, is it geometry principles? So it's going to be spread out over 2 years, or is it a full year of advanced geometry? And what sociological theory has suggested is that the rigor and pacing of courses itself can be highly influenced by the socioeconomic status of the families in the school. And if we're going to study inequalities on the basis of SES, then we have to make sure that the course-taking variables are coded in a comparable way, which often meant that Jamie's team was going to the course catalogs and saying what lessons and what topics were covered every single semester. I think the one of the key takeaways is that this was not just a kind of copy-paste rubber stamp representative sample. This actually was closely designed for the research questions we had around understanding inequality and their effects through the course-taking curriculum in American public schools.
Read more about this topic in the monograph issue, Mindset by Context, Schools, Classrooms, and the Unequal Translation of Expectations into Math Achievement by Carroll, Yeager, Temple et al. If you like this video, consider watching our Monograph Matters playlist. For additional resources related to these and other issues of the monographs of the Society for Research in Child Development, please visit monographmatters.srcd.org.